been a year now since President Biden signed an executive order aimed at enhancing police practices across the nation. Recent developments in places like Minneapolis have also garnered widespread attention, with a judge granting approval for a settlement agreement between the city and the state human rights department just last Thursday. This agreement mandates the implementation of new regulations for law enforcement officers. So some progress being made here. In the wake of these events, there's been an intensified call then from Black lawmakers in Congress urging further action in the realm of police reform, which raises, I think, several questions, crucial questions I want to try to unpack in this hour with our guests. Questions like, is police reform now experiencing a surge in momentum on a nationwide scale? Don't laugh. Legitimate question, I think. How can communities and law enforcement agencies work collaboratively to ensure that the progress achieved in police reform is not only substantial, but also enduring? And what role does AI, we were talking about AI earlier today with Sherry Belafonte and Anthony Sparks in our conversation about the Hollywood writers' strike. I mean, AI is impacting every aspect of our lives, and that's in part why they are on strike right now here in Hollywood. AI taking over everything, including some of their jobs. And so they're trying to get their arms around what that means for the future. But it's also, again, AI, that is, playing a part in every aspect of our lives. And so I want to talk about what artificial intelligence does and means in terms of shaping modern policing. So a whole lot to talk about in this hour regarding police reform, or the lack thereof, a year after Joe Biden signed this executive order. I am pleased to be joined by a retired senior detective supervisor with the LAPD and one of the nation's leading police procedure and use force experts, Tim T. Williams, Jr., who joins us live in studio right now to talk about the future of police reform. Mr. Williams, how are you, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. How about yourself?
If I complained, I'd be an ingrate. I'm doing well, and I'm glad to have you on and glad to have you in. So thanks for coming to see me. I appreciate it. Let me just start with a broad question, and we'll narrow. We got the hour, so we'll narrow as we move through the hour. But let me just, I'm thinking now of Ed Koch, former mayor of New York City. Actually, two people come to mind. I spent some time with Ed Koch years ago, and spent some time as well with the godfather of soul, James Brown. Why do I mention Ed Koch and James Brown in the same sentence? Because both had a funny way of assessing how they were doing, how they were being perceived. Ed Koch, as you may recall, in New York became famous for moving around the city and asking people, how am I doing? How am I doing? Very famous Ed Koch was in New York City, and people remember that to this day. He'd walk around, and you'd see Ed Koch in New York as mayor. He'd say, how am I doing? How am I doing? And James Brown, every time I saw The Godfather, would always say to me, Tavis, what the people saying about me? What the people saying about me? Always wanted to know what people were saying about him. So I think of Koch and Brown in that regard, which leads me to ask how we are doing. It's a broad question. Again, it's been over a year since the president signed this order. So broadly speaking, how are we doing? And then we'll unpack it.
Well, how we're doing, we're in some instances not doing.
Okay.
I'm
not surprised by that answer, by the way, but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things I do, I handle cases pretty much all over the country as it relates to police procedure and use of force issues. And everyone looks at the fact that Biden is signing these executive orders, which is great. Don't get me wrong. But it doesn't reach down to the local level. These are federal mandates that deal with federal law enforcement. And a lot of times it doesn't get down to the local level. And the thing is that one of the things we find that's an educational problem, in that the community, the advocates don't know that, great at the top, but down here where it matters a lot, it doesn't reach. I handle cases all across the country. Policies and procedures are pretty much different all across the country. It's like a quilt. And what needs to be done at the local level is there should be some type of uniformity that embraces what is being done at the federal level. And how do you make that happen? Well, civic responsibility. You learn this stuff in high school. And you can't wait till you get to 18 or 21 and be able to vote. You got to vote. Then you got to vote for the right people. You got to put square pegs in square holes. You can't. And a lot of times we put round pegs in square holes, and you're not getting the issues done. Then you talk about the unions and what they're doing, law enforcement unions. Well, if you do your civic responsibility, I believe, having worked in law enforcement for almost 30 years in LAPD, and then doing what I'm doing for another 20 years, that's almost 50 years doing this stuff, there can be a change. Sometimes change is slow, but change can happen if you do it right.
Yep. You mentioned a moment ago that what is lacking at the local level, it doesn't trickle down to the local level, these federal mandates that the president put in place over a year ago. What's lacking at the local level is uniformity. And I heard that, and I'm trying to process it. Because in every municipality, policing is going to be done differently. So when you say that what's lacking at the local level is uniformity, unpack that for me. What kind of uniformity ought we be thinking about? What are you referencing when you say that uniformity is lacking at the local level?
Well, the thing is that, for instance, there are certain Supreme Court cases that mandate what law enforcement does in the area of use of force. There are situations where, like for instance, the chokehold. We always talk about this chokehold. Well, now in California, that chokehold is pretty much almost non-existent because now there are mandates at the local level that has stripped law enforcement of that. I had a case in San Francisco, a federal case, and peace officer standards and training or posted, as you heard before, they teach that, but in the learning domains. But as you look at the learning domains, that's not policy; it drives policy. And then the county council at this particular municipality says, "No, we don't want that here," and they tighten it up in their procedures where that wasn't in place. So the thing is that as you see what's going on at the top, when I say the top, talk about the federal side, you have to, the law enforcement, not law enforcement, but the politicians have to look and see what benefits their constituents and try to mirror that, not only at the local, but nationwide.
Yeah. When we come forward, I want to talk about the chokehold. You raised it. I'm glad you did. I was going to get there. So since you beat me to it, I'll follow up on it. When we come forward, our guest in this hour is Tim T. Williams, Jr., and I am delighted to have him on this program as we talk about the progress we have made or lack thereof in the years since President Biden signed this executive order, which was intended at least to bring some reform to the extent that he could do it to police departments and practices across the country. Tim T. Williams, Jr. Is author of a book, which I'll get into a little bit later in this hour, called A Deep Dive, an expert analysis of police procedure, use of force, and wrongful convictions. A Deep Dive is the name of the text. Subtitle, An Expert Analysis of Police Procedure, Use of Force, and Wrongful Convictions. We'll get into that a little bit later in this conversation, particularly the wrongful convictions part that I've got some questions about. We'll get to that. But we were talking before that break about the chokehold. Let me just ask you a couple point-blank questions. It's now illegal in California, but how are we doing on making I'm thinking of Eric Garner in New York City, any number of other examples I could offer that you know better than I. But broadly speaking, where are we with regard to the chokehold in policing across the board nationally?
Well, again, as I stated earlier, when I travel the country and handle cases all across the country, the policies are pretty much the same. Procedures are a little different from agency to agencies, but there are certain things that needs to be focused on uniformly across the country. One being the chokehold, and it's I call it a snail's move. I can see it going, getting a nationwide attention, but it's going to take time, and you need to have chiefs in place that will mandate these types of changes. You have to have city attorney, county councils in place to make sure that the policies do not cause them liability issues, to making sure these things are in place. And the final thing, the most important thing, is training. You got to train officers to do the right thing. Everything shouldn't be a fight. I was in law enforcement for almost, like I said, almost 30 years. And I'm looking at this, every time there's almost a police citizen contact, it's a fight. I mean, it's like a gladiator sport, and it shouldn't be that way. And it's how you treat people, how you talk to people, how you communicate to people, and how you make your job easy. Now, you're going to have some issues where all that stuff is not going to work, but there's ways to deal with that. But the thing is that you've got to do the right thing and communicate correctly and respectfully.
Yep. I'm not sure you can give me an exact number or precise number in this regard, but I want to press on this one more time. I'm just trying to get a sense of how, to your point about uniformity, how routine is the chokehold still as a matter of policy in police practices across the country? Is it still legal in most departments? Not legal in most departments? Like, I'm just trying to get a sense of how the chokehold is being regarded right now.
Well, it's being regarded as an issue in law enforcement, and when I get cases that involve that, I amplify that.
Yeah.
And just like this issue of positional asphyxiation, where officers are piling upon the suspect or the person they're contacting, and the person dies in custody.
Yeah.
Well, the Department of Justice did a study in 1995 dealing with this issue, and it was a very comprehensive. And in that study, embedded in that study, it was called the Anatomy of a Struggle, and it talks about how when you do certain things, your body responds, and how that response can end up to possibly death, and including death. So going back to the chokehold, I think it's like, remember here in Los Angeles, remember the bar arm? That was used until it wasn't used anymore, and that under Gates, and that was stopped, and then we went to the carotid hole, and then that was stopped, and then that training, that focus, the outlook has to be looked at with different eyes. And if you look at that with different eyes, then you have a different result.
Yeah, with respect though, I'm still not sure if I heard an answer yet as to whether or not more departments or less departments these days are using the chokehold as a legal tactic. That's what I just want a straight answer to that question.
Yeah, I see from my cases that I handle, I see a less than I have seen more in the past.
Okay.
So it's starting to trickle down.
Got it. All right. That's what I wanted to know about that. You mentioned training a moment ago. And it seems to me that before you get to training, you got to figure out who you're going to train, which is my way of asking or raising the issue of who you're going to hire. So you train who you hire. So we can have a conversation about training, and I've had that conversation ad infinitum, ad nauseum about the fact that it's the training. I get it. Don't disagree. No argument there. What I've not been satisfied with are the conversations I've had about who we decide to train. Again, who we decide to hire. So let me just ask you point blank, since you are in this space, this is the work that you do, are we hiring the right or wrong people to be police officers?
Well, from my perspective, I'll give you the point blank answer. I would say about 67% we're hiring the wrong people.
Whoa, hold up.
Hiring the wrong.
You said 67%?
60 to 70%.
60 to 70. That's still a high number.
It is a high number.
A high number of hiring the wrong people.
That's right.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Well, there's your answer, right?
Yeah.
If your assessment is, as an expert, that 60 to 70% of the people that we are hiring to be cops are the wrong people, then to your earlier point, it's not so much just about training. That's why I raised that issue. You got to back up before training.
Thank you very much.
How do you fix this issue of hiring the wrong people?
Well, I'm going to give you an answer.
Okay.
The first thing is that, and I've talked about this in other media platforms, is that you've got to get retired law enforcement from doing background investigations. Because what they do, they bring the same type of individuals on that has that law enforcement motif. You got to bring people on who have core values. They have respect for life, compassion for people, and things of this nature. Now, a lot of them have that when they come on, but then there's this culture that seeps in. The culture that seeps in. And then that modifies, that's changed. Then when you get through the academy, then you go out to patrol. Then you get a training officer. He says, look, young man or young woman, what you learn there in the academy is one thing. This is the street now. This is the way we do things here. Now,
sounds like Lonzo, and I'm thinking Denzel, man.
Yeah. Training day, huh?
Yeah, exactly. My mind went there immediately. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah.
But the thing is that, one of the things, and a lot of people don't know this, but there's HBCU, Lincoln University, that has a police academy, you see. And they're trying to get blacks into law enforcement that perhaps would not normally get into law enforcement. And they're trying to get the training get them trained to the point that when they go to an agency, that what they've learned in this academy, you learn what the agency teaches and what they do, but you bring a different culture with you, and you try to break the focus of the things. You talk to individuals, and it's always that them and us situation. I saw that when I was on the department, and I see it a lot when I'm working on cases and I'm testifying. You have officers, especially if you work in a criminal case, you have officers, detectives who are sitting there, and they're mad dogging you because you're tearing up their case. Well, if you did the case right to begin with, I wouldn't be there.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. You mentioned Lincoln University and their police academy. I was in a conversation with a friend of mine this weekend talking about Lincoln University, in fact. So here you come raising it again. Let me just ask you again a point-blank question. Why? Two questions, actually. I'll start with this. Why, in this present moment, would any black person want to be a part of any police force? Why would I want to do that?
Well, the thing is that, if when I came on, there was about almost 250, 300 blacks in the department.
Yeah.
I came on in the 70s.
LAPD you're talking about.
LAPD.
Sure.
And there were those that I ran in contact with who were blacks in law enforcement that, because I was getting ready to leave, because I was tired of dealing with the racism, that touched me, allowed me to, which made me stay, and to the point where I'm at now. So to answer your question, why would I, as a black, would I want to do this? Well, if you want to make change, you got to make change from within that will manifest itself from without. When I was in law enforcement, blacks have issues being in law enforcement. So the same issues that you see out there, you have those same issues within the department.
Yeah, that's my point. I mean, I've heard these stories time and time, whether I'm talking to you. Cheryl Dorsey's a friend of mine. She's been on this program. Who was at LAPD. You know Cheryl Dorsey.
I know Cheryl.
Yeah, I mean, they're all kind. I mean, I've had these conversations again ad infinitum. And every time you talk to somebody black in law enforcement, they tell you about the racism they endured inside the department. So that's why I asked, like, at this moment, like, why would I want to be? I mean, why volunteer for that? Is my question.
Well, people came before me that allowed me to have the successes that I had in law enforcement.
I get that.
And I believe that, that what I have done will give somebody, if I reach one person, I'm successful. Because remember the old Temptation song, like the snowball rolling down the side of a hill? As it rolls, the snowball gets bigger and bigger. Well, I may not be here to see it, but, change will come. Change will come. Yeah. But you gotta be willing to deal with the issues that you're going to face to bring about that change.
Yeah. The flip side of that question of why would any black person right now want to become a member of any police department anywhere in this country, maybe it's not the flip side, but it's certainly connected to it. And that is the black cops we saw beating this black man, Tyree Nichols, killing him in Memphis, Tennessee.
I remember that.
Yeah. So your thoughts about that we've now gotten to a point where even black cops mistreat black people.
Okay. Well, there is a story in the story. Okay. Number one, you have you specialized units are needed within law enforcement. Because I haven't been there. There's a need for that, but you don't let them run rampant. What you see there, you had individual black officers who didn't have 5 years on, but working in a very specialized, high-profile unit. And then you find out that this same unit, they arrested over 600 people in 1 year. Well, red flags should be coming up all over the place when you have those type of numbers. And it's a leadership problem. It's a leadership problem. It starts at the top.
Why should the simple nature of the number of arrests raise red flags? What am I missing here?
Well, what you're missing is that what I want to know as a leader.
Right.
Well, I want to know how many of those arrests end up to be cases been filed on by the prosecutorial arm of the DA or the city attorney, and how many of those cases ended up in convictions. If I find that there's 600 arrests, but only 50 or 25 to 50 been filed on, and only 25 has been resulted in convictions.
I mean, somebody's being harassed.
Then what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
You see, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Then it comes to the area what you call constitutional policing. Or you playing the numbers game. And you look at law enforcement, you look at the criminal justice system as a whole. The numbers drives if you're going to get high up in that organization. You see, and this, they as a CEO of an organization, you got to look at this and examine this, and see if this is going to cause you problems down the road. And I dare say, if they would examine, you may find that very few perhaps have been filed on, and perhaps very few have been convicted in the crimes or alleged crimes that they were arrested for.
Nope, I take your point. I just want to know why that number would be so alarming to someone who's in the business of arresting people and keeping crime off the streets. I take your point, though. If that number is so high and it's not resulting in anything, then again, somebody's being messed with on the streets. I hear you. Timothy Williams Jr., let me ask you a question I've asked of others. This past weekend, as you may know, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of Black Lives Matter. There was a huge festival here, People's Justice Festival here in Lindbergh Park, adjacent to this station. This station was a media partner with Black Lives Matter to celebrate their 10th anniversary. And again, I've asked this of others, but I'm curious as to your perspective, given that you were on the inside LAPD for almost 30 years. For 20 years now, you've been dealing with these police issues around the nation in the work that you do now in your own company. Just top line for me, what you think Black Lives Matter has done or not done, accomplished or not, as it were, with at least raising the issue of police accountability.
Well, they raised the issue of the fact that black lives do matter. And they know it manifests itself even in law enforcement. You may not hear a lot of blacks talk about it within law enforcement. I'm from a different era. And when I was president of the Oscar Joe Bryan Association, we made our voice heard and known. And we were so vocal sometimes it retarded our career. But the word had to get out. So the thing is that Black Lives Matter is important, and they give a message, but the system, if you will, I'm trying to be nice, the system has put a image on it that is not correct. And the thing is that, I'm a black man. My life matters. I have grandchildren that are out there that could be stopped by law enforcement. Their lives matter, you see. And my siblings, their lives matter, you see. So the thing is that I can leave this studio, walk across the street, and have a major issue with law enforcement just because that's that Tim Williams over there. Let's stop and talk with him, that type of thing, you see. So the thing is that my life matters, your life matters, black lives do matter, and we hear the things that, well, blue life matters and all that stuff, but that's not the issue.
Yeah.
That's not the issue.
Yeah.
The thing is that we go back from the slavery time, and our lives mattered back then, and the same mentality that has seeped through the centuries, through the decades, which is still present today. Our lives matter.
Yeah. Let me ask you why. I am curious. I could have started our conversation here, but I'm curious as to why you do the work that you do. As I mentioned earlier, for those who may have just tuned in, you're one of the nation's leading police procedure and use force experts. We'll get to use of force in a second here. I should say get back to it. We've talked about it a bit. But why do you do what you do? And I'm asking that because you are trying to address systemic problems. You're trying to address structures. But addressing, again, systems and structures is not easy work, particularly when you're talking in the realm that you operate in, and that is the realm of policing. So, like, why do this every day?
Well,
it's an uphill battle if ever there was one.
Yeah. Oh, it's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
It's an uphill battle. I'm going to take you to church a little bit.
Come on, let's go.
Where much is given, much is required, and I take that very seriously. I was blessed to be exposed to a heck of a lot when I was in law enforcement that can make a difference in this community. The same question you asked me, I'm asked by my peers. Why am I doing this? Well, this is my passion. This is my core value. If I can help one person, then I'm successful. And I've talked about that in my book, the people that I've helped.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and the changes that have been made. So the thing is that, yeah, I could sit back and drink my mint juleps and not do anything, but that's not who I am. That's not in my DNA.
Yeah.
This is I believe this is my mission in life, and I'm continuing to do this until I can't do it no more.
Yeah. We talked earlier specifically about the chokehold. I want to talk more broadly now about use of force. Are we making any progress in this country when it comes to the issue and how we get to the issue of use of force?
Use of force is very problematic in this country, and I see it from California to the New England states and all in between. And the thing is that it's again you've got to put square pegs in square holes. You got to have individuals that have the core values, if you will, to do the right things. It's your respect. You see what's going on, what happened in Lancaster, and with the deputy sheriffs who had these two women that were in the car holding babies in their arms, and one was socked in the face by the deputy sheriffs. You have the other ones. There was I guess some type of shoplifting going on. They grabbed her by the neck, threw her to the ground, tased her, and was getting ready to hit her, and thought twice about it. You see, now the FBI is investigating this. Well, how long are we going to have to do this? How long is this going to go on? That's why I give that high number. It could be lower, but that's why I'm going to keep that high number. 60 to 70%.
Yeah. Of hiring the wrong people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And the thing is that if you allow yourself to be a part of a culture and transform who you are, shame on you. Yeah, I don't want you around me.
Yeah.
When I was testifying in court in Florida, this DA, who had the same last name as my name, is Williams, he says that, Mr. Williams, LAPD torture your core values. Is that right? I said, absolutely not. LAPD didn't teach me anything. My mother and father gave me my core values. And what I bought, what they trained me as a child, and what I brought to the department, those are my core values. So I brought something to the department, not the department giving me something that we quote unquote capitalize it in core values. So the thing is, that's why you got to make sure that you're recruiting the right people. You are recruiting people that will make a difference in the community. You can't have folk that are doing the recruiting, not recruiting, but the background investigation, that are going to have, same people that are coming out. You have the same type of mentality coming in. When I was president of the Oscar Joe Biden Association, we worked on recruitment. We had Muhammad Ali and Kid Norton helped us in our events, and we were recruiting more minorities than LAPD was because of the pull that these two national or international icons had.
Sure.
You see, so you got to do things a little bit differently than what you're doing, and I applaud Lincoln University, HBCU. I'd like to see all the HBCUs do this, or as many as possible. They all have criminal justice systems in their curriculum. You see, have your own academy and produce what you want to see in the community.
I want to come back to this number one more time before I move forward and talk about wrongful convictions in just a moment here. I can't imagine any organization, I'm thinking about this radio station, for example, and any organization, any entity in this country. I can't imagine any organization hiring perennially 60 to 70% of the wrong people and surviving. And if your assessment is anywhere near correct, it says something about why we're in the mess that we're in. You can't hire to the 60th or 70th percentile the wrong people and think your organization can succeed.
Yeah. And the reason why I get this high number is because of what comes across my desk.
Right.
And I see this stuff not locally but nationwide.
Sure.
The same mentality that I see locally, you see it nationwide. And you've got to make a difference. Change is slow. But you got to start. Change begins somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It begins somewhere, and you got to make the change. Now, these are my numbers based upon what I've been exposed to.
I got it.
And you may have people call in or say, "Well, Tim Williams, he might be smoking some bad dope or something. That's not right." You see, that's what my
Your
experience
experiences, yeah.
tells me.
Talk to me about black people and they're being oftentimes wrongfully convicted.
Well, I've working cases on the front end. I've been very fortunate to be able to have input in some cases where individuals weren't convicted that will end up in wrongful convictions. Then on the backside, I've worked on cases where individuals have been in there 25, 30 years, and then I get the case and you find out what the issues were back then. There was one case in Chicago that I handled. It was called the Englewood Four, ENGWOOD, and these 4 kids were arrested for rape and murder. As I was looking at the discovery and investigation, the person who did it was there at the crime scene, watching the police officers doing what they were doing. And if they had did what they were supposed to do, they would have found this out. But these kids were convicted and did 25 years. And I got the case. And when you have that type of information, you have to have historical knowledge of investigations. If you go up to the organization and miss everything, you can't do this type of work. So I went there and I asked them for certain things that I needed, which I knew what was going on during that time, and I got it and wrote a report. I went to Chicago and was deposed twice, and my deposition testimony abrupted the trial. And these gentlemen, these were grown men. When I got them, they were released, and they were found that they didn't commit it. They found the person who did it, and they got compensated for it. But you can't. All the money in the world can't pay for that time. That kind of time. Yeah. And then one case here, and I had a case where our client was accused of a drive-by shooting, killing in a drive-by shooting, and his DNA was on the gun. Well, I'm going through the file. I'm reading the case. Yeah, it ain't too much I can do. So I sat down with the defense attorney and said, look, let's re-look at this DNA, and we need a DNA expert to look at it for us. So he agreed, and then we went to the court, and the judge allowed us to appoint a DNA expert for it. Long story short, we found that the electropherograms, these are charts that with squiggly marks on it, they were stutter marks. We found that also that through the error log, that they mixed up the samples. And we put all this came out in trial. I talked about it in my book. And he was the individual was found not guilty. Now, if I was on that case, if they agreed to what the people was trying to put across, he would spend the rest of his life in prison for a crime he didn't commit.
No, these wrongful convictions are always arresting. Pardon the pun. Always disturbing for me. When you see brothers spend that many years behind bars, and then somebody like you comes along, or Barry Sheck, or somebody comes along, and starts asking all the right questions. Brian Stevenson, somebody starts asking the right questions, and these brothers end up getting out. But to your point, no amount of money can bring back what you have lost. I raised this issue earlier, Tim Williams Jr. We haven't gotten to it. we were talking earlier in today's program about AI, and as I mentioned to you, AI is at the epicenter of the debate that's happening right now in Hollywood, and that's why the writers are on strike and the actors are now on strike together for the first time in over 60 years. Both of these unions are out, but AI is one of the considerations that they're trying to get addressed. So AI, as I said earlier, is a part of every aspect of our lives these days. How is AI going to impact policing in the future?
Well, they're trying to do that now by having predicting crime, predicting outcomes, predicting issues, and we did that when I was in law enforcement. But we did longhand arithmetic. We sat there, we analyzed. But now you put people putting together these algorithms, and there may be biasness in there, and these algorithms. So you got to be very careful with that. With facial recognition, it was problems, and they stopped doing that. At least here, in L.A., they stopped doing that because of the problems that had happened. You have witnesses who think they get it right, getting it wrong, and then you go with artificial intelligence. Then you have that stigma of getting it wrong. And again, who's putting together the science behind this stuff?
Yeah. Let me offer this as the exit question. As I said earlier, what occasioned this conversation today was President Biden over a year ago signing that executive order to try to bring some police reform, nothing meaningful coming out of Congress. So he did the best he could with this executive order. My extra question is, given what the president did a year ago, never mind whatever progress or lack thereof we've made in that year, are we headed in the right direction when it comes to police accountability, when it comes to use of force, police procedure, etc.?
Well, it's going in a direction, but I think if you want the change that you want to see, it's got to stop at the local level. It's got to stop at the local level. He has no power at the local level. He has power at the federal level. And the thing is that the public has to understand that, and we've got to be sure we get the right people in Sacramento, in these legislators, states legislators, and that go up through the chain. Same way in the courts. These judges run for election. You got to make sure you have the right people in the system, and going on from there. So you got to be a part of the civic discussion. You got to be a part of meaningful voting, and just don't go to the ballots because it's time to go. But your vote does count.
His book is called A Deep Dive, an expert analysis of police procedure, use of force, and wrongful convictions. You can learn more about the book and all the other work that he's doing at timwilliamsjr.com. That's timwilliamsjr.com. Once again, the book is called A Deep Dive, and we've taken a deep dive over the last 60 minutes, and now I'm coming up for air. Mr. Williams, good to have you in, sir. All the best to you.
Well, thank you for having me.